It is no longer news that the rising cases of suicide in Nigeria is on the increase, but what is now news is that the scourge has taken its toll on religious leaders who are presumed to be the bursting of solace for those who are depressed by the challenging and depleting economic situation. Nigerians received with shock the death of Michael Arowosaye, a gospel minister with the Redeemed Christian Church of God in the Logogoma district of Abuja in May 2019. It was gathered that Arowosaye committed suicide because of his inability to pay his house rent, which led to depression and subsequent killing of himself. His suicide is just one of the many cases recorded in the country in recent times. Apart from economic hardship, factors including terminal illness and depression are top causes for suicide. According to the recent report by the Federal Ministry of Health, 30% of Nigerians suffer from mental illness, noting that with a population of about 200 million, the country has a high rate of mental illness, which implies that Nigeria has about 60 million persons with mental illness. Nigeria, in essence, has more mental cases than the population of every West African country, which is perhaps the reason for the increasing suicide in the country. Information obtained from several news reports indicates that students and lecturers of higher institutions constitute the highest victims of suicide cases in the country. In one of those cases, Adigun Emmanuel, a 27-year-old final year student of the Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Ilorin, committed suicide by ingesting a bottle of Sniper after he failed his final year project for the third time. Also, a lecturer at the Department of Crop Production, College of Agriculture, Kwara State University, Dr. Solomon Asholola, took his life after his request to be made a full-time lecturer was declined.
For suicide, there are many causes, one of which has been highlighted severally, and that is depression. But aside depression, there are many other causes of suicide, mental health issues. The theories around suicide states it's a point where you give up on life. There's a feeling of hopelessness, there's a feeling of worthlessness, and you start having suicidal ideation, like you've given up. No way out of the situation you find yourself. For a depressed patient, they see the future as bleak, so there is no hope, nothing to look forward to. But aside from depression, there are other instances of mental health that the patient can actually commit suicide, a patient that has hallucinatory experiences. When you have hallucination, we talk about perceiving or perception in the absence of appropriate external stimulus. And that means the patient may be hearing voices when there is actually nobody talking to him. And such patients could hear instructions to kill themselves. Even in a depressed patient, that's why you see some patients that are depressed will confess to being the cause of some dastardly act. They implicate themselves, and I used to tell my students or trainees then that those of you that have stoned witches in the villages, you may have killed a depressed patient. Aside from that, when you are in a state of anomie, you don't feel relevant to your society. You feel that you are not contributing anything, you cannot affect anything. Then you get to the stage of thinking about suicide as an exit.
Social insecurity. When you have a situation whereby, because of the economic situation, you have a lot of people, because like they say, people differ, just like the fingers are not equal. The way you absorb pressure is different from the way another person will absorb pressure. So,
Nigerian government recently placed a ban on the manufacturing of small bottles of organophosphate called 2,2-dichlorophenyl dimethyl phosphate, popularly called Sniper, used in killing mosquitoes and pests, has hitherto become an option choice killer for persons contemplating suicide, stating that the ban has become necessary in view of the recent increase of suicide cases across the country, which has been linked to the use of the substance. A medical expert, Dr. Daramola Tayo, gives reason for the cases of suicide in the country.
People's psychological makeup has not been buffered, or would I say supported so much nowadays. I was listening to the news a few weeks back, And I understand that an undergraduate of one of the Nigerian foremost universities actually videotaped himself and posted before he actually committed the act of suicide. So I class that as, if you excuse my choice of word, semi-responsible reportage of suicide cases. The way it is also reported makes it interesting to someone else who is already contemplating suicide. And that's why we need to be careful about talking on air about the various methods that people use. It could be suggestive to some other person who is already on the verge of suicide.
The Nigerian law prohibits individuals willfully taking their life for whatever reason. Specifically, the Criminal Code of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in Chapter 27, Section 327 states that any person who attempts to kill himself is guilty of a misdemeanor and is liable to imprisonment for a year.
To do with our laws, just like in Abuja where we're having this interview, Abuja is guided by the Penal Code, and we're in the south by the Criminal Code, and there are provisions for it. Of course, you cannot charge somebody who has committed suicide, who is dead. You cannot charge a dead person. So the only offense that these two laws provide for is attempted suicide, what we call inchoate offenses. So, and there are provisions in these two laws that guides this, and these provisions provide for both of them have similar jail term of a maximum of 1 year.
While Nigerians have high expectations for the second term of President Muhammadu Buhari and the 9th Assembly to urgently revamp the economy, create employment and make life better for Nigerians, thereby reducing the economic anxieties they pass through, health-wise, medical experts gave the following reason in curbing the menace.
What do? We need to encourage our social support. We need to identify those that need help. Government, as a matter of urgency, needs to rise up to put in place policies and measures that would not make people feel that they are irrelevant in their society. You may wish to know that hardly is there any young doctor in this country that is not having the ambition of writing the foreign exams to leave the country. And I use that to x-ray the larger society. If doctors who are supposed to be one of the top notches in the country are trying to exit the country, then there is a problem. We can now think of the young graduates, those that have not been to school. Are we able to live? Are we able to survive? What are the reasons why people get to this level? Frustration. You give up on yourself, you lose all hope. So anything that pushes you to the extent or to the stage of losing hope, either in yourself or in the society as a whole, could predispose the person to suicide. So we need good policies, we need good social support, we need early identification of those that have mental health disorders and treatments, so that appropriate intervention is done before it gets to the stage that they actually are able to commit suicide. I must say this, that when a patient is severely depressed, he may have the intent of suicide, but he may not be able to carry out the acts because they also have accompanying loss of energy. You understand? But when you are managing the patient, he suddenly gains some energy and he now carries out the acts, despite you feeling that this patient has improved. That is what we call paradoxical suicide. Because it's a paradox. Somebody that is already improving and you are rejoicing, the next thing you see him commit suicide. Also, positive spirituality. I'm careful not to say religiosity. Spirituality would also enhance your psychological well-being because you have something or somebody you believe in and you project your worries to this higher being, as opposed to religiosity where you are bending to the whims and caprices of whoever is in charge of your religious belief. Spirituality is when you are in tune with a higher being, for example, God. So you are fortified, you know that even if things are not working now, the future is bright. God is able to take care of your worries. And so you have some resilience, you have some cushioning effect so that you don't get to the stage of feeling let me end it, there is no hope.
Challenges, they say, is inevitable in life. People who are facing trying times should therefore explore all legitimate means in solving their problems rather than end their life by suicide, because suicide only ends the life of the victim while it passes the problem to other people. Samuel Akpan, TVN News.